Hello, and welcome to Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is preventing wildfires, appropriate subject, right, for our theme, issues for debate in American public policy. We've experienced Canadian wildfires this summer, as we have I think about 4 years ago, no more than 5 years ago. It was during the COVID era. We're going to be talking about a lot of wildfires in California. So, and I trust you have your access to your textbook off of the course page and your lecture models, right? You're going to need your lecture model today. We're not always going to lecture, but we are today for you lecture types. And I have a set of notes for you to fill in some blanks. I'm not going to make it too tough, but you want to get those out. Effective wildfire prevention requires shifting from a passive wait and watch approach to active hands-on ecosystem management. This means correcting past government overregulation that has allowed deadwood and forest biomass to accumulate, turning our woodlands into hazardous tinder boxes. So if I was to hold up a single match, if I was just hold up a single match and we were in class, a live class, I would ask you guys for a volunteer to guess the temperature of forest fire. I would wait for you to guess, right? And I will do that right now. I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. How hot do you think the temperature of a forest fire is? If you guessed between 1400 and 1470 degrees Fahrenheit and 2200 degrees Fahrenheit, you would be correct. You see, every catastrophic wildfire in American history has started the same way, with a tiny spark. But here's the inconvenient truth. Here's the inconvenient truth about these monster wildfires that you see on the news. Mother Nature didn't build that fire. Decades of bureaucratic red tape and flawed federal mismanagement built it. Today, we are going to look at the real culprit behind our burning forests. Forest biomass, the deadly buildup we've allowed to rot on the ground, and we'll evaluate how government micromanagement has crippled true forest protection management. We will also today discuss how we can realistically manage fire risks and explore why it is our responsibility as concerned citizens to demand better stewardship of our land. Now, you should have your lecture models printed out. Let's see here. Here we go. So the heads up terms. We have controlled burns we're going to take a look at today. Controlled burns are designed to automatically or manually control or extinguish fires to protect people, property, and assets. Controlled burns, or fire suppression rather, is intended to extinguish flames. It often includes sprinklers, fire alarms, and extinguishers. Then there's the 10 a.m. rule. The federal government, in cooperation with states, ensured that any fire that began on a certain day was eliminated by 10 a.m. the next morning. And then you have let burn zones. These allow fires to keep burning, and that ended the 10 a.m. rule. Then there are prescribed burns. I'm going to go into a little more detail later with the prescribed burns, but it's a heads up term for sure. So instead of meeting, here's a summary of them. Instead of meeting only management objectives of a controlled burn, the prescribed burns look to aid ecosystems that are dependent on fire, thus aiding the natural habitat. And then FEMA. FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And that's when the feds took charge of forest management. So what are the issues? What are the issues? And the first objective I want to look at here is I want to factor in the argument that debris is an issue to forest fires. I think it was October of 2020. California had a terrifying wildfire spreading more than 300,000 acres. It was at a place called Berry Creek, and it was witnessed to be as high as, get this, 60 feet high and a dozen miles wide. Terribly, terrible, horrifying. So this followed a fire in one of the state's nearby national forests due to a lightning strike. So assured that it was under control, a windstorm drew the fire to this small community I'm mentioning, known as the North Complex Fire. It killed 15 people and destroyed over 2,000 structures. And as we know, right, the West is arid, has arid temperatures, so it's the areas are given to wildfires. And the Creek Fire was the largest in California history. And that looks like a good quiz question, if I don't say so myself. Now, your first little set of notes here on your lecture model. In the past, controlled burns were a major source of forest fire prevention. Unfortunately, the workforce has become thin. So factors behind the growth in forest fires are denser forests, more people living in these areas, and climate change, right? These are the major suspects. I would add this too, it isn't in your notes, but conifer forests in California have become a possibility for extinction. And of course, the smoke, right? The smoke from the fires we know is a health risk. We know past summer, right here, with the forest fires coming out of Canada, there's a couple of days they're telling you not to go outside, right? So, but it is a health risk in the western states. And it seems that most of the damage has been done on federal land, and there's a lot of that. So 6.2 million acres have been treated in the last 10 years, and these are not good numbers. That's a 200% increase. About 100, or about one, no, not 100, about 1% of the Sierra Nevada mountain range has undergone controlled burns. But since federal agencies have been thinned, there's really not much more that can be done. Experts say that even if there was a 5% increase, that would not make much of a difference. Reportedly, crews who conduct controlled burns are going to be called on to even fight larger wildfires. Now, looking back at the notes, aiding to the forest's vulnerability during a controlled burn is the underbrush and other fuels. That undertaking is expensive, and some areas do not have all of the necessary equipment. So here's the thing: when Folks look to move near the forests for seclusion, um, cheaper homes, or just natural scenery. They suffer property damage because of all of this. And according to the National Fire Protection Association, it was in 2017, they saw $10 billion worth of damage. So looking at the notes again here, two things really need to be done. You need to have fire retardant materials that should be used on those homes. And then the land around the lodging needs to be cleared to provide a buffer. You have states such as Oregon, they're looking for ways to keep people from moving into these dangerous areas. Climate change is argued primarily by the Democratic Party as having dried out soil and vegetation, thus increasing evaporation, making the soil more susceptible to fires. Less snow melt is decreasing the water supply, they say, and decreasing natural resources to combat the wildfires. And then young trees suffer too, as they do not grow back after a wildfire due to um, a lack of moisture. So just something for you to practice with. You can stop the video and look at your notes we just talked about, and think about and you don't owe this to me. This is just for your own practice. In one or two sentences, how would you generalize the issues facing the problem of wildfires? So part two, what is the background of fire suppression? What is the background of fire suppression? And I'd say the objective here would be understand the development of fire safety. So in 1910, U.S. fire policy began. The Department of Agriculture adopted the policy of suppression. That's where they trained and made professionals out of the force of woodland firefighters. A year later, in 1911, the 10 a.m. rule was enacted, and it was a greater role for the feds as they cooperated with the states in ensuring that any fire that was began on day one but was put out by 10 a.m. the next morning, the 10 a.m. rule. So again, a question that you can stop the video on as we move on to another section here. Look at those. What seems to be the most efficient of those early methods? Controlled burns, fire suppression. What do you think of the 10 a.m. rule? Part three, what are the new policies? What are the new policies? In 1967, the National Park Service realized the efficacy of allowing some natural fires to keep burning, known as the let burn zones, ending the 10 a.m. policy in 1978. And just as a side note and a bad note, wildfire season seems to be lasting much longer today than it did 40 or 50 years ago, right? And the budget for the Forest Service is about $2.25 billion annually. So what do you like better? Let it burn or the 10 a.m. policy? Why would that be? Part four, what is the current situation regarding the latest fires? And here, my objective here to bring up this part here is to get you to develop a sense of urgency as to what method works best, and then we just implement it, right? 7,677 fires occurred in 2022, 7,127 in 2004, and as of July 6th of this year, 37,200 209. So that's over 3.3 million acres. Part 5, how is the state responding? How is the state responding? And here, what I'd like to do is use the objective approach in questioning governmental decisions. So California, right? California, where a lot of the stuff occurs. Governor Gavin Newsom, you may have heard of him. He signed several laws into effect to set up warning centers, updated military standards, etc. Not bad ideas. One measure, I said, etc. Well, one of the etc. etc. was a measure that the California Public Utilities Commissions, excuse me, get leverage over several areas. So, and then you got Oregon just north of that. They passed the $21 million aid package to go to property destruction. And majority of that money will be supposedly going to schools, right? Supposedly going to schools. And these problems are getting worse. These problems they're getting worse. And is there something we need to write is this something we need to write our legislators about? And if you were writing your legislator, based off what we've learned so far today, what would you recommend? Part 6. What are the actions by the federal government? And my objective here is to determine whether the fires are due to climate change or forests that just need to be cleaned. The late Senator Dianne Feinstein of California, she blamed the problem on climate change. She introduced the Emergency Wildfire and Public Safety Act, and this calls for deployment of wildfire detection equipment and establish wildfire risk training centers. The lack of active land management is almost 100% the cause. This is what Nicholas Loris said. He's an economist from the Thomas Rowe Institute, and that's kind of his call on it. He also went on to say that adding to the forest's vulnerability during a controlled burn is underbrush and other fuels as well. But he also noted that climate change has nothing to do with fire kindling, gathering across the forest floors. Other researchers also share his skepticism. Shortly before leaving office in 2001, President Clinton limited the ability of the United States Forest Service to thin out these dense thickets of foliage and down trees on federal land to bring the West into a pristine state. Bob Zybach, an experienced forester with a PhD in environmental science, told the Daily Caller News Foundation that he was referring to warnings he had made years ago, telling officials that warding off prescribed burns in Oregon and California just created kindling that fuels fires. Let's take a look at prescribed burns. I want to break that down. A couple notes here. An average of 10 million feet of timber was removed each year from the Forest Service land between 1960 and 1990, the data show. And those numbers dropped between 1991 and 2000 and continue dropping. They continue dropping. An average of only 2.1 billion feet of timber was removed from the land between 2000 and 2013. According to the data, that's an 80% decline. So that's a lot. So an overarching challenge to reduce the size and strength of a forest fire is basically to reduce the fuel load, right? Which is burnable biomass such as grass, pine needles, shrubs, and fallen trees. So a prescribed burns, these are basically planned fires that are carefully controlled and started in specific locations to meet management objectives. Prescribed burns are used to restore habitats, reduce the risk of wildfires, and help ecosystems that depend on the fire. They can also help grow young trees, restore native plants, and control invasive species. Prescribed burns are different from controlled burns because they must adhere to many specific conditions, including weather, soil, moisture, terrain, and ignition procedures. Prescribed burns, too, are often carried out by teams of fire experts. And we just covered this, so disregard that. And we'll come down here to also in the Senate, Senator Ron Wyden introduced the National Prescribed Fire Act, including larger controlled burns and burns in high risk areas. And in the national education campaign, he headed up Burner Bob, by Burner Bob. The House of Representatives developed FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and what that did was it shifted the financial burden of fires to the federal government. President Trump allowed or approved the emergency measure and funds. The Emergency Wildlife and Public Safety Act was used to relieve some forest management from oversight activities and helped it deploy wildlife equipment to more rapidly as well. So, and again, set up a risk training center. Grants were provided to make harvesting of dead trees more viable and providing homes with fireproofing material. And moving ahead, there are concerns about the timing of the burns. Since the fire season, as I mentioned earlier, it's getting longer, right? So, just kind of wrapping this up, I'm going to show you a graphic organizer here, and these are on your week one. Week one, these are going to be in all of your modules, the graphic organizers, but it's a visual for you visual types. Look, gives you a look at what we talked about today. So the issues, right? We looked at controlled burns, fire retardants to homes, clearing homes near forests. Issues could be climate change, less snow melt. Then we talked about the background of fire suppression, policy of suppression in 1910, and the 10 a.m. policy. And then we looked at federal responses, right? Emergency Wildlife Public Safety Act. We talked about how there's not enough land management and the need for prescribed burns. Larger controlled burns were legislated, and then burdens to the feds and FEMA. New policies were let burn zones, and then state responses. We talked about California, warning centers, updated military standards are built, more leverage to public utilities commissions. And in Oregon, also, a $21 million package, and most of that money would go to schools. So with the rest of the the modules, we get a rhythm and a flow to all of this. You will see we do have an in-class assignment. All right, yeah, that'll be due 11:59 of this week. And we have the discussion question and due also 11:59 Sunday night, and there's a quiz. So any questions, comments, concerns, feel free, as I said in the welcome video, to contact me. By now, if you've looked at the syllabus, you could see all the times I am available. So yeah, don't hesitate with questions. It's never a problem. Until next time, see ya. Bye-bye.